I never imagined my mother would be the kind of person I would need to investigate. Not my mother, who had baked cookies for every school event, who had bandaged my scraped knees and stayed up late helping me with homework. But grief does strange things to people, I would learn. It twists them into versions of themselves that feel unfamiliar and frightening. When Dad died suddenly of a heart attack at 58, I was 26 years old, still paying off crushing student loans, still believing my parents were unshakable pillars of decency and love. The night the lawyer read Dad's will, I sat in that oak-paneled office feeling numb and displaced. Mom squeezed my hand so tightly it went completely numb, her fingernails digging into my palm. The room smelled like old books and furniture polish. "Your father wanted to make sure you're taken care of," she whispered, her voice thick with what I thought was grief. I squeezed back, grateful to have her beside me in this impossible moment. The lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses named Mr. Henderson, read through the usual items in a monotone voice. The family house in Maple Ridge, Dad's old sedan, the life insurance policy. Then came the line that made time stop completely. "To my son, Matthew Reynolds, I leave the sum of $2,400,000 held in trust until his 27th birthday." The number hung in the air like something unreal. $2.4 million. More money than I had ever imagined having. I looked at Mom, expecting to see a proud smile through her tears, expecting her to squeeze my hand again and say something about Dad's generosity and planning. Instead, she blinked once, her expression unreadable, and turned her face away from me toward the window. Something cold flickered across her features before she composed herself. At the time, I thought it was just grief playing tricks with her emotions. I had no idea it was the beginning of something much darker. The weeks after Dad's funeral blurred together into a fog of casseroles from neighbors and sympathy cards that said things like, "Time heals all wounds." The house felt hollow without Dad's presence, without the smell of his strong coffee at 6 in the morning or the sound of him humming while he read the newspaper. Mom spent most of her days locked in Dad's study, supposedly handling paperwork. She claimed there were mountains of documents to sort through, insurance claims to file, accounts to close and transfer. Every time I asked about the trust fund Dad had left me, Mom gave me the same tired response. "Sweetheart, these things are complicated. The funds are tied up in taxes and estate transfers. The lawyer is working on it. You just need to be patient." Her voice was always gentle when she said it, reassuring. And I believed her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. She had never given me a reason to doubt her before. I trusted her with everything. My 27th birthday arrived on a cold Tuesday in November. I spent it quietly, still feeling the weight of Dad's absence more than any excitement about coming into my inheritance. The day came and went without any word from the lawyer. No trust fund transfer. No phone calls about paperwork to sign. Nothing at all. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe the legal process just took longer than I understood. But a small seed of doubt had been planted. When I finally worked up the courage to ask Mom about it again a few weeks later, she sighed heavily and looked at me with what seemed like disappointment. "Matthew, the market has been terrible lately. I made the decision to reinvest part of the money for your future. Dad would have wanted me to be smart about this. You'll thank me later when you see the returns. Just give it time to grow." Her words sounded reasonable on the surface, but something nagged at me. Reinvested? With what authority? Dad's will had been clear. The money was supposed to come to me at 27, not be managed by Mom indefinitely. When I pressed her gently about the specifics, she brushed me off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Your father would have wanted me to manage this properly. You're young, Matthew. You don't understand how these things work yet. Trust me." And because she was my mother, because I wanted to believe she had my best interests at heart, I let it go. I wish I hadn't. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break when I saw Mom's new post on her profile. She was standing in front of a massive white brick mansion with tall columns and a circular driveway. The caption read, "New beginnings. Excited for this next chapter." The house behind her looked like something from a magazine, sprawling and expensive and completely out of reach for someone living on Dad's modest pension and life insurance. My stomach dropped as I stared at the photo. I immediately assumed she must have sold our family house in Maple Ridge. It was a nice house, worth maybe $300,000 on a good day. Maybe she had downsized to something smaller and was just visiting this mansion for some reason, maybe a friend's place. But something compelled me to drive past our old house that weekend. When I pulled up to the familiar street, I felt my chest tighten. The for sale sign was still planted firmly in the front yard, slightly weathered but definitely still there. The next day, I called Mom, trying to keep my voice casual and light. "Hey, I saw your post. Looks like a beautiful place. Where did you move to exactly?" There was a pause on the other end, just a fraction too long. "Oh, just a smaller place in Willow Creek," she said airily. "Nothing fancy, really. Just needed a change of scenery after everything." Her voice was too bright, too practiced. I thanked her and hung up, then immediately pulled up Zillow on my laptop. Willow Creek. I typed it into the search bar along with recent sales. The results loaded slowly, and then there it was. The exact mansion from Mom's photo, listed at $1.9 million. Sold 4 months ago. I clicked through the photos in stunned silence, recognizing the grand entrance, the marble floors, the chandelier in the foyer. This wasn't a smaller place. This was a palace. And somehow my mother had bought it. My texts to her started going unanswered after that. When I called, the phone would ring and ring before going to voicemail. When she did finally respond, her messages were vague and hurried. "Busy with house stuff," or "Can't talk now, we'll call you later." But she never called back. I felt guilty for even suspecting her of anything wrong. This was my mother, the woman who had raised me, who had been married to my father for 32 years. But the math didn't lie, and it was screaming at me from every angle. Dad's will had been crystal clear. $2.4 million in trust, to be released to me at age 27. That birthday had passed 4 months ago. And now Mom was living in a mansion worth nearly $2 million, despite having no income beyond Dad's modest life insurance payout and Social Security. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore anymore. So why was Mom the one living like a queen while I was still in my cramped apartment, still drowning in student debt? I took a personal day off work and drove 3 hours to the estate lawyer's office downtown. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, looked distinctly uncomfortable when I gave my name. She asked me to wait, then disappeared into a back office. I could hear muffled voices through the door. After 15 minutes, Mr. Henderson finally called me in. His office was exactly as I remembered it from the will reading, but somehow it felt colder now, more hostile. The lawyer cleared his throat awkwardly and shuffled papers on his desk without meeting my eyes. "Your mother requested that all communications regarding the estate go through her directly. She indicated that you had agreed to this arrangement." I felt my face flush hot with anger and confusion. "I didn't agree to anything," I said firmly, leaning forward in my chair. "I've been trying to get information about my trust for months. She keeps putting me off." Mr. Henderson frowned, the first crack in his professional demeanor. He opened a file folder and began flipping through documents, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Then his eyes flicked up to meet mine, and I saw something like pity there. "According to these transfer records, the trust account was closed 6 months ago." My heart stopped. "Closed? What do you mean closed? To where?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The funds were moved to a joint account under your mother's authority as executor of the estate." It felt like someone had punched a hole straight through my chest. The air left my lungs. My own mother had drained my inheritance, the money Dad had specifically left for me, the future he had carefully planned. I sat there in that lawyer's office, trying to process what I had just learned, feeling the foundation of my family crumbling beneath me. "Is that legal?" I finally managed to ask. Mr. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. "It's complicated. As executor, she had certain authorities, but this should have been disclosed to you." I drove straight to her new mansion that evening, anger and betrayal burning in my chest. The gate at the entrance was ornate iron, electronic. I had to press a button and wait for her to answer through the intercom. When her face appeared on the small video screen, she smiled like nothing was wrong. "Matthew, what a surprise. Why didn't you call ahead?" Her voice was cheerful, oblivious, or maybe just pretending to be. "Because I wanted to see where my college fund went," I said flatly into the camera. The smile faltered, but she buzzed me in anyway. The gate swung open smoothly, revealing a long driveway lined with manicured hedges. The house was even more impressive in person, 3 stories of gleaming white brick and tall windows. Mom met me at the front door, still trying to maintain that bright smile. The foyer behind her gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Everything looked expensive, untouchable, stolen. Your father wanted me to be comfortable, she said, leading me inside. You can't begrudge me that. Comfortable? I asked, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. Or untouchable? Mom, that was my inheritance. Dad left it specifically to me. Not to you. To me. She waved her hand dismissively and walked into a sitting room decorated in soft grays and whites. Everything looked like it belonged in a design magazine. Oh, Matthew, don't be so dramatic. I'm managing it properly. You're young. You would have just wasted it on rent and gadgets, and who knows what else. I invested in property. Real assets. You'll thank me later. Property? You mean your mansion? The words came out harsh, accusatory. She straightened her posture, her expression hardening into something I didn't recognize. Our mansion, she corrected coldly. You can visit anytime. This is family property. Visit. The word hung in the air like an insult. Visit, like a guest in what should have been partly mine. Like someone granted permission to enter rather than someone with an actual claim. I left without saying another word, afraid of what I might say if I stayed. For months after that confrontation, I ignored her calls. My phone would light up with Mom several times a week, and I would watch it ring until it went to voicemail. Each message was some variation of the same theme. Family shouldn't fight over money. Your father would be so disappointed in you. I only did what I thought was best. When are you going to grow up and understand? But it wasn't about money anymore, if it ever had been. It was about trust, about betrayal, about the parent I thought I knew turning into a stranger. I started gathering documentation on my own. Bank statements from the estate account that I managed to get copies of. Property records from the county assessor's office showing when Mom had purchased the mansion and for how much. Tax filings that showed suspicious transfers. Each document I collected told the same story. Mom had systematically moved every dollar Dad left me into accounts she controlled, then used that money to buy herself a mansion in her name alone. The evidence was damning, but I still hesitated to do anything with it. I didn't know personal estate audits were even a thing until I met Clara at work. She was new to our company, hired to handle some financial restructuring, and we ended up having lunch together one day. The conversation somehow turned to family, and before I knew it, I was telling her everything. She listened quietly, her expression growing more serious. I used to handle forensic accounting for a law firm, she said when I finished. If you really want to know where every penny of that money went, I can help you trace it. Clara was meticulous and thorough. Over the next several weeks, working in her spare time, she followed the money trail that Mom had left. Wire transfers, suspicious tax claims, shell accounts, fake investment entities. She found everything. One evening, she called me sounding both excited and disturbed. Matthew, you need to see this. Your mother created a company called Reynolds Holdings LLC. My father's last name. But the company was registered 1 month after he passed away. Guess who the sole officer and owner is? Mom, I whispered, feeling sick. It was worse than I had imagined. She hadn't just mismanaged the money or made poor investment decisions. She had deliberately, systematically stolen my inheritance and hidden it behind fake companies and fraudulent paperwork. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was calculated theft. Clara printed out everything she had found and organized it into a folder that grew thicker with each piece of evidence. This is fraud, she said gently. You know that, right? What she did is criminal. I drove to the mansion again, this time with the folder of evidence sitting heavy on my passenger seat. The gate looked more intimidating this time, like a barrier protecting a fortress rather than just a house. When Mom's face appeared on the intercom screen, I could see her hesitation before she smiled. Matthew, this is becoming a habit. Come in, come in. The gate opened, and I drove through slowly, gathering my courage. She was waiting at the front door, wearing expensive-looking clothes I had never seen before. We need to talk, I said, holding up the folder. About Reynolds Holdings LLC. About where Dad's trust money really went. About all of it, Mom. Her face went pale, the practiced smile finally cracking completely. I don't know what you think you've found, but I cut her off. I found everything. Bank transfers, tax fraud, falsified investment documents. All of it with your signature, your accounts, your name. You didn't just take my money. You committed fraud to do it. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched emotions flicker across her face. Anger, fear, defiance, and finally something that might have been shame. Come inside, she said quietly. We should talk about this privately. We sat in her pristine living room, the afternoon sun streaming through windows that probably cost more than my car. I needed to secure our future, she began, her voice defensive. After your father died, I panicked. I didn't know how I was going to survive. You waste money on rent and gadgets. You don't understand value. So you stole from me? My voice was shaking now. You took the money Dad specifically left for me and bought yourself a mansion? How is that securing our future? She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. You're being dramatic. I invested in property, which is smart. This house is an asset. It will appreciate, and you can visit any time you want. It's practically yours. The delusion in her words was staggering. No, Mom. It's yours. Your name on the deed. Your mansion bought with my money. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. The house, the lies, the complete lack of remorse. It was too much to process. Clara had told me I should report it, that what Mom had done was serious enough to warrant legal action. But the thought of actually turning in my own mother made me feel sick. How had we gotten here? How had the woman who used to make me breakfast and drive me to soccer practice become someone capable of this? Clara convinced me finally, sitting across from me at a coffee shop, her expression serious but kind. If she diverted funds from a will, Matthew, it's not just unethical. It's embezzlement. And if you don't report it, she'll get away with it. More than that, she'll think she can keep doing things like this. You have to hold her accountable. I knew she was right. I had known it for weeks, really. But knowing something and actually doing it are very different things. That afternoon, I made the call to the estate board and filed a formal complaint. The estate board assigned an auditor within a week. A serious woman named Patricia, who asked detailed questions and took extensive notes. She requested access to all of Mom's financial records, which required a court order that took another month to process. Weeks turned into months as the investigation deepened. Every update I received was worse than the last. Mom hadn't just moved my trust money. She had also diverted Dad's life insurance payout, money that should have been split between us, and funneled it all into her real estate ventures. When the board finally summoned Mom for a formal hearing, I sat in the conference room as she entered. She was wearing pearls and a cream-colored suit, carrying herself with a confidence that seemed completely disconnected from reality. She looked at me once, her expression hurt and betrayed, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. Matthew, you're blowing this completely out of proportion, she said, her voice taking on that tone she used to use when I was a child misbehaving. This is embarrassing for the family. The auditor, Patricia, slid a thick folder across the conference table toward Mom. Mrs. Reynolds, we've completed our investigation into the estate of your late husband. Would you care to explain these documents? Mom opened the folder with hands that suddenly weren't quite steady. Inside were photographs of her mansion, detailed bank transfer records, copies of the fake company she had created, and her signature on forms that clearly showed she had falsified information to gain control of funds that weren't hers. Her face went through several colors, red, then pale, then red again. There must be some mistake. I was managing my son's inheritance responsibly. That's what a mother does. Patricia's expression didn't change. A mother doesn't forge documents, create shell companies, and transfer trust funds into personal accounts without the beneficiary's knowledge or consent. That's what a criminal does, Mrs. Reynolds. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Criminal. My mother, a criminal. The board voted unanimously to freeze all of Mom's accounts pending resolution of the case. Within a matter of weeks, she couldn't pay the mortgage on the mansion she had bought with stolen money. The bank began foreclosure proceedings. I should have felt vindicated, should have felt like justice was being served. Instead, I just felt empty and sad. This was my mother losing everything because of her own greed and deception, and I was the one who had set it all in motion by simply asking for what was rightfully mine. She left me a voicemail one night, her voice raw with anger and pain. You ruined your own mother over money, Matthew. You destroyed our family. I hope you're proud of yourself. Your father would be ashamed of you. I listened to it 3 times, each word cutting deeper. Part of me wanted to call her back and apologize, to somehow make this all go away. But Clara reminded me gently that I hadn't done anything wrong. She made her choices. The consequences are hers to bear, not yours. The legal process dragged on for almost a year. Depositions, court hearings, financial reviews. My lawyer advised me not to press criminal charges, saying that recovering the money through civil court would be faster and less traumatic for everyone involved. I agreed, not because I wanted to protect Mom, but because I couldn't bear the thought of her actually going to jail. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering full restitution of the trust fund plus damages for the emotional distress and legal fees. But by then, most of the money was gone. The mansion was sold in foreclosure, recovering only about 60% of what Mom had paid for it. The fake investment company had no actual assets. Mom's personal savings, what little she had left, were seized and added to the restitution fund. In the end, I recovered about $800,000 of the original $2.4 million. It was better than nothing, but it felt like a hollow victory. When the judge said, "Funds to be restored to the rightful beneficiary," I finally exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 years. Mom moved out of state shortly after losing the mansion. She sent me a brief email with a forwarding address in Arizona, where her sister lived. No apology, no explanation, just an address. We didn't speak for nearly a year after that. Every holiday felt quieter and emptier than the last. Christmas came and went without any contact. My birthday passed unmarked. I missed the mother I used to have desperately, the one who had baked pies and helped me with homework, not the one who had forged signatures and stolen my future. I used part of the recovered money to pay off my student loans completely, which felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The rest I invested conservatively, determined not to squander what was left of Dad's gift to me. I moved into a better apartment, nothing extravagant, just a comfortable place where I could think and breathe. Clara and I had become close friends through the whole ordeal, and she helped me set up proper financial planning. "Your dad was smart," she said. "He knew you'd need this money. Don't let what your mother did make you afraid to use it wisely." On a rainy afternoon in October, almost 2 years after the initial confrontation, a letter arrived in careful handwriting I recognized as Mom's. My hands shook as I opened it. "Matthew, I was wrong. I can't fix what I did, but I hope one day you'll be able to forgive me. I lost everything, including you, and that's my fault. I kept something for you. It's not much, but it's all I have left to give." Inside was a photograph of our old family house in Maple Ridge and a note that said simply, "Your father loved this porch. I kept it for you." I stared at that photograph for a long time, memories flooding back. Dad sitting on that porch every evening with his newspaper. Mom bringing him iced tea. Me doing homework on the porch steps while they talked about their day. When I drove back to Maple Ridge the following weekend, I wasn't sure what I would find. The house looked smaller than I remembered, a bit weathered by time and neglect. But it was standing, and Mom was there, sitting on the porch rail, looking older and smaller than I had ever seen her. "I lost everything," she said quietly as I walked up the steps. "The mansion, my savings, my pride. But I managed to keep this place. I paid the back taxes from what little I had left. It's yours now. I signed the deed over yesterday." We sat on those familiar steps together, the wood creaking beneath us the way it always had. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she started talking, really talking, in a way she never had before. She told me everything. How losing Dad had broken something inside her. How she had panicked about money in a way that didn't make rational sense. How she had convinced herself that managing my inheritance was the same as stealing it. "I didn't trust you to handle the money," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But the truth is, I didn't trust myself either. I just wanted to feel in control of something after your father died. Everything felt like it was falling apart, and I thought if I had enough money, enough security, I could keep the pieces together." I realized sitting there that she wasn't the villain I had built up in my mind over the past 2 years. She was a broken person who had made desperate, terrible choices. She was the same woman who used to bandage my scraped knees and teach me to ride a bike, who had just never learned how to process grief in a healthy way. Dad's death had fractured her, and instead of seeking help or leaning on family, she had tried to build walls of money and property around herself. It didn't excuse what she had done, but it helped me understand it. "I can't take back what I did," Mom said, wiping tears from her weathered cheeks. "I can't give you back those years of fighting in silence. I can't restore all the money I wasted, but I can make amends where I'm able." She handed me a small folder containing documents that transferred the Maple Ridge house fully into my name, free and clear. "It's not $2.4 million, she smiled sadly, "but it's home. It's where you grew up. It's where your father and I were happy before I ruined everything." For the first time in 2 years, we had dinner together. Nothing fancy. Mom made spaghetti the way she used to when I was a kid, with too much garlic and not enough salt. We didn't talk about the legal battles, or the money, or the betrayal. We talked about Dad, sharing memories and stories. She laughed when I reminded her of the time Dad had tried to install a ceiling fan and ended up putting a hole in the ceiling. He was terrible at home repairs, she said, her eyes bright with tears and affection. But he tried so hard. I'm learning to live small now, Mom said as we washed dishes together in the old kitchen. I rent a tiny apartment in Arizona. I work part-time at a bookstore. It's humbling, and it should have been my life all along instead of chasing mansions I couldn't afford with money that wasn't mine. I dried a plate slowly, considering her words. Maybe that's where peace actually starts, I said. In being content with what you have instead of always wanting more. Clara helped me start a small nonprofit organization in Dad's name over the next few months. We called it the Reynolds Trust, dedicated to financial literacy education for young adults. Every seminar began with the same line that I wrote personally. Money reveals character, but it can't replace love. We taught college students how to manage student loans, budget effectively, understand investments, and avoid the kind of financial desperation that had consumed my mother. Mom sometimes volunteered at our seminars, quietly handing out flyers and information packets. She never talked about her own story, never revealed that she was the cautionary tale behind the whole organization. Neither did I. It felt like a kind of penance for her, a way to give back and prevent others from making the mistakes she had made. Watching her interact gently with young students, offering encouragement and support, I could see glimpses of the mother I remembered from childhood. It took me years to fully understand what Dad had actually left me. Yes, there was the money, what remained of it after Mom's theft and the legal battles. But more importantly, he had left me integrity. He had left me an example of honest living and careful planning. He had left me the knowledge that doing the right thing, even when it was painful and complicated, was always worth it in the end. Those lessons were worth more than any trust fund could ever be. Mom and I still carried scars from what had happened. There were topics we avoided, wounds that hadn't fully healed. Holidays were sometimes awkward. Phone calls could be stilted. But every time she smiled at me across that old porch in Maple Ridge, every time we shared a meal in companionable silence, I knew that forgiveness wasn't about erasing history. It was about choosing to write a new chapter despite the painful ones that came before. It was about refusing to let betrayal define us forever. If you ask me now what I ultimately did with the inheritance that was finally, partially restored to me, I would say this. I built a life Dad would have been proud of. I created something meaningful with the Reynolds Trust that helped other young people avoid financial disasters. I maintained the family home that held so many precious memories. And I built a fragile but real bridge back to my mother. A bridge she had burned, but that we slowly, carefully reconstructed together over time. One afternoon, I found an old box in the attic of the Maple Ridge house. Inside were letters Dad had written to me over the years, but never sent. Birthday letters, graduation letters, letters for major life milestones. I sat on the dusty attic floor and read through them all, tears streaming down my face. In one letter, written just months before he died, he wrote, "Matthew, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I want you to know that the money I'm leaving you isn't about making you rich. It's about giving you freedom. Freedom to make choices, to take risks, to build the life you want without being crushed by financial worry. Use it wisely, son. And remember that money can reveal both the best and worst in people. Choose to be the best." I showed that letter to Mom the next time she visited. She read it slowly, her hands trembling, tears falling onto the yellowed paper. "He was so much better than me," she whispered. "He planned for your future while I only thought about my fear." I put my arm around her shoulders. "We're all just doing the best we can with what we know. You made terrible choices, Mom, but you're trying to make them right now. That has to count for something." Clara eventually became more than just a friend. We started dating about a year after the legal battles ended, taking things slowly and carefully. She understood me in a way few people could, having walked beside me through the darkest period of my life. On our first anniversary, I took her to the Maple Ridge house and showed her around. "This is where I grew up," I said. "This is where I learned about family, for better and worse." We got married on that porch 2 years later. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family. Mom came, wearing a simple dress and genuine happiness for the first time in years. She hugged Clara tightly, and whispered something in her ear that made Clara smile. Later, Clara told me what Mom had said. Take care of him. He deserves all the love in the world, and I'm so grateful he found you. It was the closest thing to true redemption I had seen from her, this ability to be happy for me despite everything. The Reynolds Trust grew beyond my wildest expectations. We partnered with universities and high schools, teaching thousands of students about financial responsibility, estate planning, and the psychological traps that money can create. I always shared Dad's letter during our sessions, the one about money revealing character. My father left me an inheritance, I would tell students. But the most valuable part wasn't the dollar amount. It was the lesson about who I wanted to be when tested by wealth. Mom and I found a comfortable rhythm. We talked once a week, usually on Sunday evenings. The conversations were lighter now, filled with everyday topics rather than the heavy weight of past betrayals. She told me about her book club and her garden. I told her about the Reynolds Trust's latest success stories. Neither of us pretended the past hadn't happened, but we also didn't let it poison every moment of the present. Forgiveness, I learned, wasn't a destination but a daily choice. On the 5th anniversary of Dad's death, Mom and I met at his grave. We hadn't done this together since the funeral. The cemetery was quiet, just bird songs and rustling leaves. We stood side by side looking at his headstone, and Mom spoke first. I'm sorry, James, she said to the stone. I'm sorry I betrayed your trust and hurt our son. I'm sorry I let grief turn me into someone you wouldn't recognize. I'm trying to be better now. I hope wherever you are, you can see that. I added my own words. Thanks for the inheritance, Dad. Not just the money, but the example. Thanks for teaching me about integrity, even though you're not here anymore. I'm doing my best to make you proud. We stood there for a long time in companionable silence. Two people bound by love for the same man and scarred by what had happened after his death. When we finally walked back to our cars, Mom hugged me tightly. I love you, Matthew. I know I have a terrible way of showing it sometimes, but I do. The money that was finally recovered, about $800,000 of the original $2.4 million, became the foundation for a life I was proud of. I invested it conservatively, generating enough income to support the Reynolds Trust and maintain the family home. Clara and I lived comfortably, but not extravagantly, always mindful of the lessons we had both learned about the dangers of excess. We donated regularly to causes Dad had cared about. We helped young family members with college expenses. When Clara and I found out she was pregnant, the first person I called after my own tears of joy stopped was Mom. You're going to be a grandmother, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. She cried on the other end of the line, happy tears this time. Oh, Matthew. Oh, honey. I promise I'll be the grandmother your child deserves. I'll do better this time. I swear I will. And when our daughter was born, Mom was there in the hospital, holding her granddaughter with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. We named her Grace, both for the quality we all needed more of and because Dad's mother had been named Grace. Mom rocked her gently, tears streaming down her face. She looks like your father around the eyes, she whispered. Same serious expression even as a baby. Watching Mom with Grace, I saw redemption taking shape. She was careful, loving, present. Everything she had failed to be during her years of deception. People really could change, I realized. It took work and honesty and time, but change was possible. The Maple Ridge house became our family home. Clara and I renovated it carefully, preserving the elements that held memories while updating what needed modernizing. The porch stayed exactly as it was, Dad's sacred space, now Grace's favorite place to play. On warm evenings, 3 generations would sit there together. Mom would tell stories about Dad that made Grace laugh. Clara would share her day at work. And I would sit quietly, feeling the weight of what we had lost and found and rebuilt. The Reynolds Trust celebrated its 10th anniversary with a gala that raised over $200,000 for financial literacy programs. Mom attended, sitting quietly at our table, proud but humble. Several young people approached her throughout the evening, thanking her for her work with the organization, completely unaware of her role in its creation. She handled each interaction with grace, never taking credit, never revealing her story. When one student said, "You must be so proud of what your son built," Mom smiled and said simply, "I'm learning from him." Later that night, as we drove home together, Mom said something I would never forget. You know what the worst part of those years was? It wasn't losing the mansion or the money, or even facing the legal consequences. It was losing you. knowing I had destroyed your trust and respect. That was the real bankruptcy, Matthew. Everything else was just numbers on paper. I reached over and squeezed her hand. We found our way back, I said. That's what matters now. Clara launched a scholarship program through the Reynolds Trust specifically for students who had lost parents. We called it the James Reynolds Memorial Scholarship, and it covered full tuition for 5 students each year. At the first award ceremony, I stood at the podium and talked about Dad for the first time publicly. My father believed education and financial security were pathways to freedom, I told the gathered crowd. He worked hard to provide that for me. These scholarships honor his legacy by providing that same opportunity to others. Grace grew into a curious, thoughtful child who asked endless questions about her grandfather she would never meet. Mom would spend hours with her, showing her photos, telling stories, keeping Dad's memory alive in ways that felt healing rather than painful. Your grandfather was a good man, Mom would say. He made smart choices and cared about people. You should be like him, not like me. But I would always correct her gently. No, Grace. Learn from both of us. Learn from Grandpa's wisdom and from Grandma's mistakes. That's how we grow. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, I would sit on that old porch and think about everything that had happened. The grief and betrayal, the investigation and legal battles, the slow reconstruction of trust, the nonprofit that had grown from ashes. I thought about how $2.4 million had revealed truths about my family that I never wanted to know but needed to understand. And I thought about how the richest inheritance wasn't actually money at all. It was the lessons learned from both abundance and loss. If someone asked me now whether I had truly forgiven my mother, I would say this. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about refusing to let the hurt define your entire relationship forever. It's about acknowledging that people are more than their worst mistakes, that love can survive betrayal if both parties are willing to do the hard work of rebuilding. Mom stole my inheritance and bought herself a mansion. That will always be true. But it's also true that she faced consequences, made amends where she could, and spent years trying to become someone better. The money Dad left me did eventually change my life, just not in the way he probably imagined. It didn't make me rich or carefree. Instead, it taught me about human nature, about the corrupting power of fear and greed, about the importance of boundaries and accountability. It taught me that family love isn't unconditional when it comes to behavior. There must be consequences for harmful actions, but it can be unconditional when it comes to the possibility of redemption. People can change if they truly want to. Clara often said that our story should have ended in permanent estrangement, that what Mom did was unforgivable by any reasonable standard. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was too soft, too willing to give second chances. But when I looked at Mom holding Grace, teaching her to garden or bake cookies, I saw something precious being rebuilt from rubble. I saw a grandmother giving my daughter the love and attention she had failed to give me during those dark years. That had to mean something. The Maple Ridge house appreciated significantly in value over the years. Clara and I received offers to sell it for impressive sums, but we always declined. This isn't about money, I would tell the real estate agents. This is about roots, about memory, about having a place that grounds us no matter what else changes. The porch where Dad used to read his paper, where Mom and I had our first honest conversation after years of silence, where Grace took her first steps. That was worth more than any mansion could ever be. On what would have been Dad's 70th birthday, the entire family gathered at the house. Mom brought flowers for his grave. Clara made his favorite meal. Grace, now 7 years old, drew a picture of a grandfather she had never met, guided by photos and stories. We sat around the old dining table and shared memories, laughed at old jokes, cried a little. And in that moment, I understood what Dad had really left me. Not just money, but the foundation for building something that mattered. Mom stood to make a toast, her hands shaking slightly as she raised her glass. To James, who was a better person than I ever was, who planned for his family's future while I nearly destroyed it. And to Matthew, who had every right to write me off forever, but chose a harder path instead. I don't deserve either of you, but I'm grateful every day that you gave me a chance to try to become someone worthy of that grace. We clinked glasses, and I saw tears streaming down her face. Not tears of shame anymore, but tears of genuine gratitude. Later, as everyone was leaving, Mom pulled me aside on the porch. I want you to have something, she said, handing me a small wooden box. Inside was Dad's wedding ring and a letter in his handwriting. I found this in his desk after he died. I kept it all these years because I wasn't ready to face what it said. But you should have it now. The letter was addressed to Mom, dated a month before he died. In it, Dad talked about his hopes for their future, his pride in me, and his wish that we would all take care of each other. Promise me, and, he had written, that if something happens to me, you'll make sure Matthew gets what I'm leaving him. Not because he's entitled to it, but because I want him to have freedom and choices. And promise me you'll take care of yourself too. Don't let grief or fear make you into someone you're not. I love you both, and I trust you to do right by our son. Mom's voice broke as I finished reading. I broke that promise. For years, I broke it every day. But I'm trying to keep it now, even if it's too late. It's not too late, I told her, folding the letter carefully. You're keeping it now. That's what matters. We stood together watching the sunset, two people who had been broken by grief and greed and betrayal, who had fought and hurt each other, who had slowly, painfully found their way back to something resembling family. It wasn't perfect. It would never be what it was before Dad died. But it was real and honest, and built on a foundation of hard-earned forgiveness. As I drove home that night with Clara and Grace sleeping beside me, I thought about how to answer Grace when she eventually asked the question I knew was coming. Daddy, what did Grandpa leave you? I would tell her the truth. He left me $2.4 million, but I only got to keep part of it because of choices other people made. But more importantly, he left me integrity, wisdom, and the understanding that the richest inheritance isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the principles you uphold, and the grace you extend even to those who fail you. Because sometimes I realized the greatest wealth isn't what you inherit. It's what you choose to do with the inheritance, both the money and the lessons. It's how you respond when everything falls apart. It's whether you let betrayal make you bitter or let it teach you about forgiveness. It's about building bridges even when every reasonable person would tell you to burn them instead. That was Dad's real legacy. Not the money, but the character to handle both having it and losing it with equal grace. The last time I saw Mom before writing this, she was teaching Grace how to make Dad's favorite pie recipe, the one she used to make every Sunday before everything fell apart. Watching them together, flour on their hands and laughter in the air, I understood that redemption is possible even after the worst betrayals. It takes time and honesty and a willingness to sit with uncomfortable truths. But it's possible. And sometimes, just sometimes, the journey through loss and restoration teaches you more than easy abundance ever could. If Dad could see us now, Mom trying to be better, me building something meaningful from the fragments of his gift, Grace growing up surrounded by love and hard-won wisdom, I think he would be proud. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because we refused to give up on each other entirely. Because we chose the harder path of forgiveness over the easier path of permanent estrangement. Because we learned that family isn't just about blood or money. It's about showing up, making amends, and trying again even after everything breaks. That, ultimately, is what I did with my $2.4 million inheritance. I used what remained to build a life Dad would recognize, to create opportunities for others, to maintain the home that held our memories, and to construct a fragile but real bridge back to the mother who had betrayed me. It wasn't the life I expected when that lawyer first read the will. But it was a life with meaning, with purpose, with lessons learned the hardest way possible. And somehow, that made it more valuable than any mansion could ever be.